Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here today. The Bridgeport Police Department moving forward into the 21st century. Part of the mandate from the mayor's office, our honorable mayor, Joseph P. Ganim, he wants our city to move forward, our citizens to be protected, and what better way than to bring in this new technology into the city. I want to introduce Councilwoman Mrs. Smith and my good friend, Jeanette Herron, my right-hand person. The Bridgeport Police Department cannot do it all by themselves, and this is why we have such great partners. Earlier, I believe this year, Detective Kim Bean, I believe, with Lieutenant Lamaine, Christopher Lamaine. By the way, Christopher Lamaine, second to none in the entire country, one of the most dedicated public servants in the city of Bridgeport. Well, they saw this and they decided that, hey, perhaps we can take a crack at it. I'm not going to go into the technical part. For that, I'm going to introduce Captain Brian Fitzgerald, who heads the Detectives Division, and he's going to explain the thing. But I am going to tell you that we are the first city in the entire state of Connecticut to have this facial recognition through DNA. This was a horrible case, a case that probably would have not been solved, but because of the efforts of these dedicated detectives, public servants, you know, there's a chance that we are going to find out who did this horrific crime, and we're going to bring him to justice. A lot of times, you know, we cannot prevent horrible incidents such these that do take place. However, we do want to bring justice to their families, and I think that that's something that the Bridgeport Police Department does very well. With that, I would like to have Captain Fitzgerald coming up, and you can give the technical.
So on June 5th, 1993, the body of a badly burned female was found at the intersection of Lafayette Street and Railroad Avenue in a vacant lot, what was a vacant lot at the time. She was sent to the office of the Chief Medical Examiner's office. Cause of death was listed as a homicide, but it's as yet to be determined how she exactly died. Detectives and investigators in 1993 did collect evidence from the scene that we were able to use in 2018 to gather DNA evidence from, and our detectives researched some technology and found this company, Parabon Nanolabs out of Virginia, who are able to take DNA samples that police departments provide them and develop composite images of victims and or suspects, as you see here. This case is a little bit unique because generally this company would use DNA evidence to try to build a composite image of a suspect of a crime. We're doing it in the opposite way to try to identify a victim who we were not able to identify at the time of the crime in 1993. So about 4 months ago, we contracted with this company to examine the DNA evidence and determine whether or not they would be able to assist us. They reported back that they would be able to assist us. What they did was, without getting into too much of the technical details of it, for that information, I would direct you to their website that's on a handout that we're going to give you today that provides all the information on how they utilize DNA to build the composite image that you see here today. But what they are able to do is determine probabilities, as you see on the poster, of skin color, eye color, hair color, whether or not the person has freckles or not, and ancestry. Using all that information, they can also make a composite image of facial structure and build what they would think is a good likeness of the person as they would have been at the time of their death. We gave them some background information because DNA cannot tell the age or the body mass index of somebody. We believe that our victim was 25 to 35 years old of age at the time of her death. So Parabon Nanolabs was able to use her age at 25 years old with an average body mass index. Through some evidence that was recovered at the scene, we believe that she may had hair that resembles either one of the composite images depicted here, so that's why the company made 2 of them for us. So the reason for the press conference today is that we're asking that if anybody in the public, relatives, friends, anybody who might have known somebody that looked like this female back in 1993 to contact the Bridgeport Police on our tips line at 203-576-TIPS. All information will remain confidential, but we are asking for the public's help to try to identify who this person was so we can move this cold case forward and hopefully resolve it through an arrest.
Captain, what evidence did detectives initially uncover back in 1993? Did they have any inkling of who this person was, what happened to her, why, was there anything at all that they were able to figure out back then?
We did take some statements, nothing that pushed us in the direction of who the victim was at that time.
So you had some witnesses?
We had some witnesses, but as I said before, the body was burned so bad that we were not able to identify her.
Is it possible those witnesses might have seen a person who looks like this walking around the neighborhood? Or
It's possible, yeah.
do you plan on re-interviewing them?
Yeah, that's part of what our investigators will do now that we have these images.
Was there something unique about this case? What was the criteria that you used in deciding to spend the money to use this new technology?
So our homicide detectives, in between working on active and current criminal investigations, are constantly combing through our hundreds of cold case homicides that we have. And we look for evidence in these cases that might have been collected early on in the investigation, but the technology wasn't available at the time to be able to do anything with it. And most of the time now we're using it through DNA technology and technology like this to try to develop further leads in a case.
So you're constantly going through your cases, trying to see which would make the best potential experiment case.
That's correct.
And how much does it cost to do this?
About $3,500.
$3,500?
Yes.
That seems pretty cheap, actually, right? Does it? I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah, well, you know what? We think it's worth it to try to identify a victim of a homicide, bring some closure to her family.
It's worth it.
Cost effective.
And I know you said it was first in the state to use the technology for this specific purpose, or tell me what is the first?
We don't believe that, and from this, what this company has told us, we're the first police department in Connecticut to utilize this technology to build a composite image of an individual based upon DNA. It has been used other places in the country. Our detectives reached out to those agencies to take their pulse on whether or not they thought that it was worth it or not. We got positive results from what they said, so we decided to go ahead and spend the money.
And had they done it with victims before, or only suspects, the other police departments that you consulted?
I'm not sure
So Connecticut hadn't done it with a victim or a suspect at all?
at all.
Why did you choose this company, Snapshot?
Actually, Lieutenant Lemaine was watching a crime television show and saw that a police department in another part of the country actually utilized this company and this technology. Our detectives did some research on it, found out that it was a viable option, so we contracted with them.
And why is it the technology usually used to try to develop information about a suspect versus a victim?
In most cases, we're able to identify a victim. In some cases where we have a DNA profile on a suspect, but they're not in any database that we can trace them through, then this technology could be used to try to develop a composite image of a suspect.
Can you speak to what it must be like for families who go so many years without answers, who might be missing a loved one and never know what happened to them, and what you're hoping this could potentially bring to a family like that?
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to a lot of the work that our investigators do to try to constantly comb through these cold cases to develop leads to close out cases and bring closure to families. And we still have a lot of families that call on a weekly basis to ask for updates on their loved one's death.
And no idea if this woman's even from Bridgeport, right? She could be.
We don't know. Yeah.
Is it really cool? Are you psyched to use this new technology?
Yeah, it was great when we were on a conference call with the company and they presented the images to us, and we were able to put what hopefully is a resemblance of the person that was killed.
Was there any clothing that was recovered, or any other?
Some evidence was recovered.
Just some idea what she might have been wearing, or?
I don't want to go into too much details about the other evidence. Our purpose today is we kind of want to get her this composite image out there. Yeah.
Jeanette, you want to say a couple of words? Come on. Thank you.
Jeanette, is this your district?
I don't even know where she
was found?
lives. We received a call this morning to come to this press conference, and I want to say, I want to give credit to these men and women that do their job diligently every day. We have so many cold cases. I run into people on the street about cold cases. They know who I am, and they say, oh, but my son, my daughter, I've had 3 situations like that. It's hard if you have no evidence or ID. This is bringing us into the 21st and 22nd century. Finally, Bridgeport is getting what we need. Next gen, now this. We need to keep on, shots fired. We keep on needing to move forward. Bridgeport is the largest city in Connecticut, and we have had obsolete resources. Because of these men and women, we're getting moved forward. Because of Mayor Ganem, we're moving forward. And because of this council who has worked diligently to push to get more things done for our police department, we're here now. I'm so pleased by this. I can go and tell my constituents now, listen, you may have some resolution later on if we start to do this on other cases. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the chiefs. And, you know, this council, we've done this, and budget time came, and now we're doing this, and we're here to fund what we need to fund. So when we talk about $3,500, it's nothing compared to what this life is worth. Yes. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. What's your name?
Jeanette Herron,
I just want
133rd District.
to give credit to our mayor, to Chief Perez, and to all the men in blue for your hard work, for your tenacity, for your diligence, and you don't give up. And that's how, when you work, when you do a job and you love what you do, you will go to it doesn't matter how many years. And we thank you for your service. God bless
Very
you.
welcome.
God bless you.
Nada, you want to say a couple of words? Nada Martinez, Councilwoman.
I just would like to say, I want to thank the woman and men in blue here, and as well as the chief. I can say that since Chief A.J. Perez has been in office, we have had a turnaround in the police department, tremendous turnaround, and this is definitely something that can solve and heal open wounds that family members may have. I'm just overwhelmed with this. This is so pleasing, so thank you all for selecting this here for the city of Bridgeport, because it's definitely needed for families to close their open wounds. So I can only imagine how many phone calls the police department will probably start getting once this gets out into the media to solve who this individual is. So thank you all.
Captain, could you speak to how difficult it is to solve a cold case and how many open cold cases you currently have?
300?
We have about 340 open.
Yeah, go ahead. You do.
We have about 340 open cold cases. This woman is the only unidentified victim. It is pretty rare to have a victim that goes unidentified because you have the body, and of course they'll go missing. This woman, we had her DNA because we had her body, but there was no DNA database at the time, so of course she couldn't have been in it. And of those 340 victims, I speak daily to their friends and family, and I know they always want closure. And I hope that they see this and they know that we never stop on those 340 cases. We're always looking for something new, and if we see technology, we're going to take advantage of it.
So there are 340 cold cases. This is the only unidentified victim.
Yes, she's currently listed as a Jane Doe.
And you know, if you could explain again how hard it is to solve a cold case. I mean,
Sure.
340 is kind of a high number, but it's tough to, right?
Sure.
I mean, people forget and.
Cold cases are particularly hard because the investigators in this case did a great job, but they were limited. And nationally, about 60% of the cases go solved, which means 40% don't. And I imagine that nearly all those cases are done by skilled investigators, but there's a limit. So when we take a cold case, they've already exhausted all of the options, all of the leads. So we're already starting with that. So we look for something new. Has anything happened new? Because it's rare that they'll have dropped the ball on any of the evidence. And in this case, we were able to find something new that we can do. And this is important because many cases have a victim-suspect connection. So once we identify the victim, we may lead to the suspect by interviewing her family and seeing who was she with last. That's the most common technique. We start with the victim and where were they last? What were they doing last? So since we don't know who she was, we don't know her last hours of her life.
You mentioned that DNA was not available then. How did you get the DNA from her now?
They did take a sample from her, And it was a short while later that the Connecticut DNA database came around, but of course she wasn't in it. And in 1998, the national database came around. Had she died today, it would have been a very different story. We probably could have put her DNA in the database, and then we very likely could have identified her that way. That's a common technique today. But it's also rare because she was burned. So when she's burned, you don't have fingerprints. So we didn't have fingerprints as an option. DNA, because there was no database, was not an option. And while we use dental sometimes, that's only confirmatory. There is no database. So we can confirm her identity once someone says, I suspect that's my loved one. We can use family's DNA, or we can use dental records or other means to confirm it. But right now, there's just too big of a pool.
The detectives at the time, why did they collect the DNA if the technology didn't exist? Was it just because they just kept everything, or?
Yes, very diligent. There's some examples that we've done right in this department, but that before DNA, they collected cigarette butts with no hope of ever getting any evidence. Years later, they were able to extract DNA from those cigarette butts, and they put a man in jail for killing 4 women. So sometimes we don't just stop at what today's technology is. We look at what might happen beyond our careers.
Can you tell us where they extracted the DNA from? Was it like
In those
hair?
cases?
No, in this case, was it a hair sample?
I don't know. It was probably blood. I don't know. It was done in '93, but they did do a proper autopsy on her, but she was just burned beyond recognition, so we couldn't take a photograph of her.
So this is the first time that this technology has been used in Connecticut, and it's for a victim. Do you foresee like using it for identifying suspects at all?
Yes, this is the first time we've used it, and we're as excited as you are to find out who she is and compare it and see if it's accurate. We'll learn together. We did wait, and we talked to some companies. Kim Bean did all the research on it. We reached out to a department in Texas, and they used it in a similar instance, and they sent us the person that they identified and the composite like we have here today, and it was remarkable. And they said they absolutely thought it was worth the money, and so did we, so that's why we're going forward. But when we do identify her, we'll all stand in judgment on how close this is.
And if it does work, then it stands to reason you'll use this technology.
Of course.
in the future.
Yeah, we're excited.
Plan.
Yes.
And this company's from Virginia, you said?
Yes, it's from Virginia.
What is your name, sir?
Christopher Lemaine,
Your title, too?
Lieutenant in the Detective Bureau.
Could you spell that, please?
L-A, capital M-A-I-N-E.
A-I-N-E. And is it lieutenant detective? Is that
Just
the official-
lieutenant.
Just lieutenant's fine, okay.
He's
You
very
mentioned
humble.
You saw this on TV in the past?
On a science show, on some science show. They said, new technology after the commercial. I said, that sounds interesting, let's see. Got the name, did some research, gave it to Kim Bean, and of course, like I give her all assignments, she ran with it for the next 6 months, called departments around the country, and determined that this was something that we should do.
So it was like a nonfiction documentary style show, or
It was probably on, it was one of the science shows, I forget the name.
like on, you know?
Science, like Discovery Science or
Right,
something.
right,
It was a
right.
5-minute clip on what we can do with DNA today. And since we work with DNA, I was interested to see what we could do with DNA today.
But it wasn't a fictional show, right?
No, this was not CSI. This
Right,
was,
it wasn't
it was
CSI.
like a news magazine show. I
Right,
forget the name.
The accuracy of their discoveries like this here, how accurate has it been in the past?
The examples we got were very accurate, and the last one that we looked at that really convinced us was from a department in Texas, and we called them, and they sent Detective Bean the actual photograph, the mugshot of the person, and the composite that they got, and it was startling. So that's why we're doing it, and hopefully when we identify her, we'll see how close it is.
Pretty cool.
So when you're watching TV, you just say, I'm doing work, I'm researching.
That's it, right? They're all billable hours.
Don't be putting in for any. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It means a lot
Okay.
to us. We're excited. Thank you.